Welcome to Live at State, the State Department's interactive virtual press briefing platform. I am delighted to welcome participants joining us today from around Europe and across the globe. Today, we will be speaking with Andrea Thompson, Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security. Before her arrival at the Department of State, Undersecretary Thompson served as the Deputy Assistant to the President and National Security Advisor to the Vice President. Prior to her tenure at the White House, Undersecretary Thompson served as the Director of the McChrystal Group Leadership Institute. She also brings more than 25 years of service in the United States military to her role, including deployments on multiple combat tours. She is happy to take your questions today on the status of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Before I turn it over to Undersecretary Thompson for some opening remarks, I would like to make a few comments on procedures for questions. You can start submitting your questions now in the Questions tab on your screen. Please feel free to leave questions in English, Russian, or French, and our moderators will translate as necessary. If you see a colleague ask a question you would also like us to answer, you can upvote it by clicking the like button to the right of that question. We will try to answer as many as we can, but our time is limited, so show your support for the questions you would most like us to cover. If you would like to see a transcript of today's briefing and receive links to broadcast quality audio and video files, please fill out the short survey by clicking on the Polls tab at the top of the event page. And with that, let's get started. Undersecretary Thompson, thank you for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to you for some opening remarks.
Wonderful. Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for those that are calling in or watching today. Again, an important announcement last week from Secretary Pompeo and from the President, and I'm just back from Beijing where I met with my Russian counterpart. So I look forward to taking your questions this morning and look forward to the interview. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Okay, our first question was submitted in advance from Lilia Mustakova from Bulgaria on Air TV. And she asks, what are the U.S. future plans regarding the control of nuclear arms and the further relationship with Russia?
Well, thank you for that question. For the control of nuclear arms, there's no change for the United States. We continue to uphold our obligations and the standards that we've set. I just mentioned previously, just returned from the P5 in Beijing, where we talked about the importance of nonproliferation and those standards for our nuclear weapons and our nuclear programs. Had those discussions with my Chinese counterpart, my Russian counterpart, Brit and French. So those standards remain unchanged. Steadfast commitment to upholding our obligations with that. And our relationships with Russia, I mentioned the same thing to the Deputy Foreign Minister. You know, I'm a diplomat. Our job is never done. Dialogue remains an important piece, and diplomacy is key and essential to that. Again, it's the responsibilities for Russia to get back into compliance, but we'll continue to engage where appropriate.
Next question also comes from Bulgaria, from Momchil Injov at Club Z. He asks, is there a possibility for the U.S. to deploy missiles in Europe which are forbidden under the INF Treaty now or after August 2nd?
You know, we've worked hand in hand with our partners and allies on next steps. And we've made mention as well to our counterparts that the conventional weapon systems, that the R&D that we've talked about, that we've been in compliance with the treaty, the Department of Defense will now move out on that. Again, we've been following the rules for since 1987. While Russia in the last 6+ years has violated that treaty. So the Department of Defense will start those R&D efforts, but there's no plans to do that. The most important thing to remind folks is we've done this with partners and allies. We've engaged early and often with partners and allies. After I met with my Russian counterparts in Geneva, January 15th, the next day, we flew to Brussels to meet with the Secretary General and our NATO partners and allies, continue to have those discussions with partners and allies. So no change for that.
Next question comes from the Danish Daily. Why would the U.S. not offer Russia access to its land-based Aegis system in Romania as a confidence-building measure? In return, the U.S. could demand access to Russia's SSC-8 missile systems. It might be a way to save the INF Treaty.
Well, it's important to remember that the United States remains in compliance with the INF Treaty. Our systems are INF Treaty compliant. So there's no reason to look at systems that are compliant. I'd also add that with our partners and allies, no one, and again I reiterate, no one other than Russia has come forward and say the U.S. these systems aren't treaty compliant. I'd also like to remind folks that the transparency, and I call that loosely the transparency measures that were raised by Russia, clearly were not transparency measures. A static display of a system doesn't tell you how far that missile can fly. That static display of the system doesn't tell you what the fuel source is. So Russia tried some propaganda at the last-ditch effort, bringing the system out, the SSC-8, the 9M729 for the Russian system. Again, people called it what it was. It was show. The people that came to watch it were not allowed to ask questions, and it didn't prove or disprove of anything of the treaty violation. So again, we've shown Russia, handed them the list of the things they need to do to get back into compliance multiple times, as have partners and allies, and they continue to disavow that violation.
Next question comes from Brooks Tigner at Jane's Defense Weekly in Belgium. To what extent is Washington's decision to withdraw from the treaty motivated by concerns over China's nuclear arsenal and the fact that it falls outside of the INF? And another question, would Washington support a multilateralized INF Mark II treaty to rope in China, India, Israel, and other countries with nuclear arsenals?
The INF treaty is about Russia. The decision on the INF treaty is about Russia and Russia's failure to abide by the tenets of the treaty. Again, to remind folks that we've worked across 2 administrations, almost 6 years, 30-plus engagements with our Russian counterparts describing the importance of getting back into compliance. So this decision on the INF treaty was clearly about Russia, continues to be about Russia. They have six months to get back into compliance. I also recognize that China has quite an arsenal that isn't INF treaty compliant. Their systems would not meet the standards of the INF treaty. So that's discussions in the future, but as I remind folks, the INF treaty today for the next 6 months is all about Russia.
A question from ZDF German TV. Did you receive any signals from China regarding their willingness to negotiate an arms control treaty that includes them?
I've not. I just returned back from Beijing. I was there again for our P5 conference, and China did not raise that. I don't anticipate that they will raise that, again, because their systems wouldn't meet the INF treaty. They've already exceeded that. So the short answer is no, they didn't raise that issue.
Next question coming from our colleagues in Lithuania. How would the U.S. withdrawal from the INF treaty affect the security of the Baltic states? Would you expect a stronger militarization in the Kaliningrad Oblast?
Well, I was in the Baltics last year. I've been in the Baltics twice now with this administration, once with the Vice President and once as Undersecretary. Important partners and continue to be important partners. And as I remind folks, the system that Russia has fielded, the SSC-8, again from the NATO nomenclature, this isn't a prototype. This isn't in a lab. This isn't in a warehouse somewhere. These are fielded battalions, multiple battalions across Russia that can range our partners and allies now. So the decision was made for us to withdraw from the INF treaty, again, so we can build those systems that will defend Americans at home and abroad and work with our partners and allies. So again, as I remind folks, the Russian system is already fielded. It can range our European partners today.
Next question comes from Deutsche Welle. What is the U.S. reaction to the statements made by Russia that it will leave the INF treaty as well and is going to develop new missiles? Will you try to conduct any negotiations with Russia after that, or is the U.S. planning to do something else?
Well, Russia left the INF treaty years and years ago. Russia left the INF treaty when it decided to design and deploy systems that violated the treaty. We've had engagement, we'll continue to have engagement, but where the announcement of late with President Putin saying that he's leaving the treaty, the truth of the matter, again, it's more Russian propaganda. They left the treaty years ago when they decided to design and field the system.
Next question comes from Vladimir Ermakov at Interfax in Russia. Given the situation around the INF treaty, is the New START treaty also in jeopardy?
New Start, again, the premise of arms control, and I like to remind folks of this as well when they talk about the INF Treaty and New Start. Arms control only works if the parties adhere to the standards that they signed up for. And when you allow violations of those treaties to occur, you undermine the principles of arms control. So again, year after year, Russia has violated the INF Treaty. We have an obligation to call them out, hold them responsible. That said, we've both met our central limits for the New Start Treaty. February of last year, both are in compliance. The other point to raise with some folks that may not be familiar is the New Start Treaty is in effect for two more years. We have until 2021. And it is a relatively simple treaty to extend. So we have time with that. The important piece here is to work the INF Treaty to ensure that arms control continues to maintain those standards and, where appropriate, take action when they're not.
Next question comes from Michael Peel at the Financial Times. Is the U.S. considering extra deployments of non-INF compliant missiles in Europe? And if so, what, where, and when?
Well, first, that's an answer for our partners over at the Department of Defense. As we mentioned with the suspension announcement and intent to withdraw, that now the Department of Defense will be able to conduct those research and development activities that they hadn't because we've been complying. So DoD will start those steps on building those on the systems that they couldn't before. The other important piece to mention is this is connected with partners and allies, before, during, and after. So that dialogue will occur with Department of Defense and our partners.
Related question from Carol Kressa at Delphi. Russia's Ministry of Defense yesterday stated that they will create new land-based missiles within the next 2 years. Is the U.S. going to respond with similar steps?
You know, the U.S. doesn't do things based on reactions for Russia. The U.S., we take actions that will support and defend the security of the American people, whatever that takes. We'll develop systems and we'll continue to refine and innovate those systems that increases the security of the American people. So we have a wide range of adversaries, but at the end of the day, it's about protecting the American people, and we'll do what it takes to do so.
Next question from Simon Schuster at Time Magazine. What is your assessment of the threat from Russia's Poseidon system, which is designated by NATO as Canyon, the nuclear-armed autonomous torpedo?
Well, we have a full range of threats, Russian and others. Again, the important thing to remind folks is that we have the strongest military in the world. We have in the past, and we have currently, and we will continue in the future. And you heard it from President Trump last night at his State of the Union address. He will continue to fund the systems necessary, and we have the strongest military. And again, I don't give much credence to the propaganda of Russia. I have utmost faith and confidence in our United States military.
Next question comes from Ukraine, Dmitry Shkurko at the National News Agency of Ukraine. After Russia has suspended its participation in the INF Treaty, what immediate measures should be taken to ensure Euro-Atlantic security? Do you see any international and multilateral format for new arms control treaties to keep non-proliferation under control?
We currently have a strong arms control regime. Again, just mentioned the P5 discussions. We have had meetings at my level, at the Secretary's level, at technical experts. Have been at NATO multiple times at those levels. So the relationship is there. So we're confident that will continue to be. So there are multilateral organizations, and we have strong bilateral relationships. You'll see defense ministerials. You'll see the 2+2 dialogue with the ministers of defense and foreign affairs. So we'll continue with that. It's one of the strong suits of our relationship.
Next question, topical one from Andrei Sitov at the TASS news agency in Russia. He says, President Trump said in the State of the Union that the U.S. wants to negotiate a new agreement to replace the INF, quote, adding China and others. Have you decided on whom else to invite to join the negotiations, and how soon may you issue the invitations?
Actually, what he said was maybe we will, maybe we won't negotiate a new deal. So too soon to tell. Again, right now we're in that 6-month window engaging with Russia to get them back into compliance with the INF Treaty.
Another question from Russia, this from Mikhail Turgiev at RIA Novosti. What will the response to the announced improvement of the Caliber systems and hypersonics missiles be?
Again, I go back to the discussions we had a little bit earlier with the Department of Defense and the President. The President will fund every system that we need to ensure that we have the security and safety of the American people and partners and allies. You've seen it in his budget, you've seen it in his actions, and the Department of Defense will move out accordingly. So we have a wide range of worldwide threats. At the end of the day, the United States is best postured to address those threats.
Question from Robin Emmett at Reuters. What do you say to European countries that are worried about being caught in a new arms race between the United States and Russia?
What I would say to our European partners is first, thank you for your partnership. You saw a strong NATO statement not only in December when Secretary Pompeo made the announcement about our suspension, and then the statement last week followed up with a very strong NATO statement. That's a telling indicator of our relationship with our European partners and allies. They continue to call out Russia. Not one country has said, you know, you're right, maybe Russia isn't in violation. So that's another indicator of the strong relationships we have. I'd also tell folks that the systems that Russia has can arrange them today. So this isn't a discussion of what if they build a system. The system's already there. So we need to continue with our partnership, continue with next steps, but remind folks, this is Russia's violation, and it's up to Russia to destroy those systems that are a threat to the U.S. and our partners.
Next question comes from Jakub Borowski at the Polish press agency. What control mechanisms could be set in the future should other countries with missile capabilities be included?
Well, with the control systems, again, arms control writ large is working. We have standards, we uphold those standards, and it's recognized worldwide. We have multiple forums where we discuss the importance of fulfilling our obligations. And as you've seen, the party that is destroying that reputation is Russia. So we'll continue to uphold those standards, and we'll continue to abide by our treaties. We'll continue to remind folks, when you sign that piece of paper, it's much more than that. It is ensuring the safety and security and the standards of our arms control regimes.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you to the participants for your questions, and thank you again, Undersecretary Thompson, for joining us here. To those who participated in today's conference, if you would like to clip audio or video from today's program, we will send you links to broadcast quality files momentarily. We will also provide a transcript as soon as it is available. If you would like to receive any of these products, please remember to fill out the survey located on the Polls tab of this event page, or send an email to liveatstate@state.gov. Thanks again for your participation, and we hope you can join us for another Live at State program again soon.